Bandwidth.
As long as we have bandwidth, because I don't want to slow it down. I'm so nervous about it.
Oh, in the
Back to the basement.
Okay, we are going to get started right now. Zog the Heilige Gemara. We are in the middle of discussing a schizophrenic shaila, because the Mishnah discussed two cases. Either when you said this is a base core exactly, and there, even if it's a mashu off, you have to reconcile, or hein chaser ben yoser, where they're up to 145th, you don't have to reconcile. The Gemara wanted to know, what did you say base core offer, and you didn't say anything. Stoma, do we say up to 145th, you have wiggle room? Or stoma, do you say it has to be precise? We tried bringing a raya from the Mishnah, but there was contradictory mashmoyusin from the Ration from the Seifa. So therefore, 6 lines from the top on Daf Kuf Daled Amud Aleph, we're going to have now a raya. Base kur offer ani moichelach. If someone says, I'm selling you a base kur of offer, that's exactly the case that we're pondering. Or another case is kib base kur offer ani moichelach. I'm selling you something like a base kur. Or I said, hein chaser, hein yeser, ani moichelach. In all these three cases, afilu pichas roiv l'sa, ay heiser roiv l'sa higiyai. So you see clearly, al mostamo nami kehein chaser hein yaser dami. We have a beautiful raya. Zok tomorrow it's not a raya, because maybe you read the brisa differently, and maybe this is how you read the brisa. Then when you read the brisa inside, beis kur offer ani moichelach, that case could be just like kibeis kur ani moichelach, meaning that you have some wiggle room. But that's only if you added the suffix of hein chaser, hein yeser ani moichelach. So that's what the Gemara suggests. Hasam perusha kamafarish. Ezeu beis kur, shehika beis kur. What type of member of saying I'm selling you a base kur that will have the same halacha as if I said I'm selling you something like a base kur, which would of course meaning you have some wiggle room up to 145th. Going to Amarle, hein cheser, hein yeser. So the Gemara neutralized the raya. But Frek Rabashi, that's not a good way to learn this brisa. Maskal Rabashi. Look at the brisa. After each case, it says ani moichelach. Beis kur offer ani moichelach. Kib beis kur offer ani moichelach. Hein chaser and yeser ani moichelach. Clearly, it's 3 different cases. Matzah Rabashi imkain ani moichelach lamali. Why is ani moichelach repeated? It should only be there once or twice, but not 3 times. El lav shmami no. You see clearly from here that stama nami. Even if you just say beis kur offer ani moichelach, it's kehein cheser and yeser dami, and you have up to 145th. Shemami no. So the Gemara concludes we have a raya that if you say stoma, it's just like you said, hein cheser, hein yeser.
You take either one. You take either one, it means the same thing.
And you still have the wiggle room of 145th. Ma'al machshalei mois. So the Mishnah says that we care to help the moicher, and if the amount of extra property in this sale, if this extra property in this sale is less than 9 kav, it's not really enough to do anything with. So if the moicher is forced to take it back, it's really hurting him because there's nothing he can do with it. So that's when we force the loikeach to pay extra according to the dollar per acre formula that they agreed upon, and buy the extra property as well. So frag the Gemara, liyafa is koicha shel moicher amrinon, but liyafa is koicha shel lekeach lo amrinon. What if the moicher says, I want to keep that little small piece of property, but the lekeach says, I want to buy it? You're telling me that it's not up to the lekeach. We don't try to help the lekeach. We're only worried about the moicher, and it's the moicher's option. I'm going to prove to you that if the lekeach wants the property, he gets it as well. Well, Tanya, it says in that brisa, piche shiva kavanu mechta lukur. That's within the 145th. But Yosy mekan, if the offset is more than that, then koivinus hamoicher limkar v'yas halakech ligach. But it says koivinus hamoicher limkar. So this sounds very much like you would force the moicher to sell that extra piece of property. So how could you say that it's only the moicher who has the option? Clearly, you see the lekeach could have them force the moicher to sell. Zokt Gemara, not at all. That's a completely different case. You know what the case is there? Hazon going to Hava Yakira Meikar. When they originally made the deal was whatever the price they agreed upon, it worked out to basically $1 an acre, let's say. Vizol, but by the time they realized that there was extra property here, the price of property dropped, and now it's only 50 cents an acre. So there, the Lakeich could say, you want to make me buy this extra acre? I'm happy to buy it, but I'm not buying it based on the original price of $1 an acre, because prices went down. I'm only willing to buy it with today's price. So Vizol, Hashta, and it went down now. Damrinan lay, we tell the Meicher, if you're going to give him land and make him pay for it, Havle or Havali Kazula the Hashta. So the Lakech will say, I'll buy the extra piece of property from you, but I'm not overpaying. The price of property went down. I'll pay you based on the current rates. And the Meicher cannot say, no, I want the original price. So therefore, that's what it means. You force the Meicher to sell it at the lower rate, and that's when the Lakeich is forced to buy it. But if the Meicher insists on getting the higher rate, there we would not force the Lakeich to buy it. Frank the Gemara, I'll prove to you not like it. When we establish what the price of this extra property is, it's according to the same formula as what he bought until now. Meaning, even if it went down, he just has to extend the original contract. We say it was the original contract that included that extra. No, that's not true. The case where the Lakeich has to buy it for the original price, that's when Hasam going to have a Zula Mekor of a Yokra Lahasha. That's talking about a case where it went up. So therefore, whether it goes up or whether it goes down, the Lakeich could say, I don't want to pay for the extra property, the higher price, I'm only asking to pay the lower price. But once the Meicher is willing to sell it for the lower price, the Lakeich has to buy it. Good. We said that up until 9 kaven, we forced the Lakeich to buy it because we don't want the Meicher to get stuck with this small piece of property. But if it's 9 kaven by a field, or I think a chatzi kav by a gino, because those are smaller, or a roiva kav, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that's enough of a piece of property that's worth cultivating. There we won't force the Lakeich to buy. There the Meicher would just take it back. Amr Afuna, Tes Kavit Shamru, Afilu Bikagdoy. So let's think about this for a minute. Remember, we said the cutoff is 7.5 kav for a core, right? So what if the property that I sold you was a unit of 2 core? So now the amount of wiggle room would be 15 kav, right? Now, so what would the halacha be? Zok Rafuna, no. This ratio that you follow of 7.5 kavim for a core is only up to 1 core. But once that 1/45th becomes tes kavim, then all bets are off. Then you don't force anybody to buy anything. Then the Meicher just keeps his property. So therefore, it's a huge chiddush. Tes kavim isn't just a property that's big enough that the Meicher can't force the Lakeich to buy. It's also something that the Meicher wouldn't be Meicher. So this ratio of 7.5 kav in the core is only up to the point where the wiggle room is 9 kav. Once the wiggle room is 9 kav, there's no mechila at all, and therefore the Meicher gets to demand payment for it, or he could take the property back. But Rav Nachman Amar, no, the same ratio applies. If it's 100 core, you have 7.5 kavin for a core. You stick to the same ratio because a person's Michael up to that ratio, even if it works out to a bigger amount of property. However, the ilka milsi yisera, if in fact you went above that ratio, then Letitia's cabin hadri. If the piece is 9 kavin, then it goes back to the Meicher and you cannot make the Lakeach pay for it. So the question is, the machlekes here is very simple. Is 9 kavin a hard cutoff that he's never Meichel more than that, which was the shita of Rava, or is 9 kavin only a cutoff legabe whether or not you force the Lakeach to buy it? But the ratio of 1/45 is across the board, no matter how big the property. What does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says, Shem Shire Besada Beis Tisha Kavin. There, we don't force the Lakeach to buy it. It doesn't say Shem Shire bebeis kur beis tisha kavod. It says besada. So it's mashma no matter what size the field is, once you hit 9 kavod, it's the cutoff. And the bailim, the moicher won't be moicher. So no. So effectively, lav the zovan like kurayim. Doesn't it even mean if you sold a large piece of property? Kasada means any size. So when it says sada, it means the zovan like kur. It means you sold a kur 7.5. Makes it that it's not moichel. From 7.5 to 9, we force the lokeach to buy it. Once you hit 9, you don't force the lokeach to buy it anymore. So that kasha was neutralized. So then the Gemara says, okay, let's try the next line in the Mishnah. Uvegina, again, it doesn't specify the size of the gina, any size, beis chatzikav. Lav the zavan osasai, even if it's 2 saw, where a chatzikav, where when you have sasaim, it would already be more than the chatzikav, and you still see chatzikav as a karav. The zavan lay saw. Chatzikav is only for a saw, but avada, if it was more property, there is more wiggling. And the Gemara asks a third time. My love the zavan lay saw. It's the same case as the case right before. So you don't have a right from our Mishnah, because our Mishnah might all be speaking in a case where you're dealing with a smaller amount, and therefore the 1/45 didn't exceed the minimum size property. Boy Rabashi, what about Soda Vanasas Gina? A soda is a place where you plant wheat. Generally, that doesn't have a source of irrigation. You got to bring water in. You could only have a gina if you have a spring there. There's some water source there. So what happens if I sold a property that was a soda, and what happened is there was more than 7.5 kav for a core, which means we have to do a reconciliation. But the problem is, there I could force the lakeach to buy. I could force the lakeach to buy it, because what am I going to do with a property that's less than 9 kav, right? But what if in the meantime it turned out a spring popped up in this property? So the lakeach might be able to say, hey, sure, originally when I bought it, you could force me to buy anything less than 9 kav, but now even less than that you can use. So don't force me to buy it. Use it for agina. So do you go Basra the time of the sale? What's going to be mechayiv the lakech, or no? At the time where you're going to make me buy it, let's look if the moicher had another option, and if it became a gina, the moicher has an option. What about the opposite? Gina v'naseh sada. So Gemara teku. The Gemara does not have a shidduch for that child. Tana we learned im haya samach lo sadeyu afilu kol shehu machzer loy kaka. I think you asked us yesterday. Everybody asked us yesterday. What if the piece of property is tiny, and therefore you would normally force the lakeach to buy it, but it's adjacent to another property that the moicher has, so it wouldn't be a problem for the moicher. He just would pack it onto another property. So the Bryce says, "Avada afilu kol shehu machzer lekaka," because there's no damage to the moicher. It won't. He could work with it with the rest of his field. So boy Varashi, bor ma'ashatavs. What if there was a small piece of property, exactly our case where we want to force lekech to take it, but it was adjacent to another property that the moicher had, but there was a bor in between? Does that separate it so that the moicher can still force lekech to buy? If you hold it's not mafsik, amasamayim ma'ashatavs. An amasamayim is not just in one place; it cuts across the whole property, right? Maybe that's worse. Maybe that would be mafsik, and therefore the moicher can force lekech to buy. And if not, that derech harabim now. And the Rishbam is careful to point out, derech harabim means it's 16 amos wide, but it's not a rishus harabim. If you have the 4-1 going across a property, you for sure can't say that you connect them. It just means a big road, but not greatly traveled. Okay? Richva de dikla ma'ashatavse. Remember, we had richva de dikla as something that would make the property not one big property, like being koine from let's say ger. Remember, we said if you make a chazaka one, a richva de dikla, which is like a cluster of trees, would be mafsik from one field to the next. Ma'ashatavsik. Then the Mishnah says something very interesting. We know, what does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says, once you go past 1/45, right, you don't only reconcile the amount that went past 1/45, because you're not moichel that. Once you have to reconcile, you'll reconcile down to 0, right? So the best way to express it would be, once you have to reconcile the moiser, you're not only going to reconcile the Moser, you'll also reconcile the Karen, right? But that's not what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says, it should be the opposite. It should say, the words are backwards. Tani Rabban Bar Nachman, Loyasa Moshe Babad Machshaloi, Ella Eskola Ravon. Kavaltik Ravon means like the Roiva Kaps, right? We said it's 7.5 Roiva, all of it. Zok Gemara Viter. What if you had a schizophrenic? And this is what he said. Beis Kur Afar, Mida Bechevel, Ani Moichelach, Hein Chaser, Hein Yeser. Right? So that's like a Yeki who became a Chusid, he comes exactly 10 minutes late to every appointment. Right? Right. And then he said, so he's a schizophrenic. So the Gemara looked at Mishnah, what is halacha? Bottle, hein chaser and yeser, mida bechevel. In other words, you go Basra the last thing he said. Hein chaser, hein yeser, mida bechevel. There, what he said last was mida bechevel. So going on to Amud Aleph, bottle, mida bechevel, hein chaser and yeser, divir bananas. And the Rashbam explains the logic behind it is that you say that the Moicher was chayzer toichid dibur. He originally said mida bechevel. Toichid dibur, he was chayzer and said chaser and yeser. So you go Basra the last thing that he said. That's how Bananas learns this halach. So the first bottle is bottle mida bechevel.
Oh, the second he said the opposite way.
That's right. So whatever he said last is mevatel what he said first. Follow the last thing he said. Omar Bava bar Mamal Omar Rav. Not everybody agrees with Bananas that you automatically assume the last thing he said is what we follow. And there are those who say it's actually a suffix. We don't know which one to rule according to, so we go with a suffix. You say achloiku. So in this case, we would go halfway. So what would we do over here? If he said both, it would be a suffix. Probably what you would do is in this case is I'm not sure. I'm not sure what we would say over here. We might say we're going to see because I'm not sure how would you do a yachloiku over here. Half of you would go with it. I'm not sure how you would do a yachloiku over here, but I think the Gemara is going to end up saying that if you don't hold of Benanas, in this case anyway, you would say that the muhsik wins. But that'll come out in the Gemara. Because I'm not sure how you could do a yachloiku over here. Right? Zog to Gemara, my kamash malon. Why do I need Rav to tell me that? Why don't you Rav to tell me that there are Tanoim who argue in Bananas? It's a Meforshah Mishnah. I don't need Rav to tell me I'm a Meforshah Mishnah. We know there's a Machloikis and people argue in Bananas. Tanina we learned. What was the case? Which promises the case was, what if I own a merchatz and I rent it to you and I say I'm charging you 12 dinar zov for the year, 1 dinar zov per month. And what happens is, in the middle of the year, they add a month to make an Ibriyur. So the question is, if it's 12 per month, then if it's 12 per year, then the Seicher benefits from that extra month. But if I'm charging you a dinar zov per month, then the masker benefits, right? So here he said both, and then the Ibriyur came, and now we have the machlokes, the Seicher and the masker are going to bed. And then the Mishnah continues on. And who at the Paskin the Shaila? And they argued on Bananas. They didn't say you go Basalosh and Achroin and you have to pay for the extra month. You know what they said? You'll pay 50% rent for that month. So it's obvious that they argue on Bananas. So why don't you need Rav to tell me that people argue on Bananas? We know the Mishnah. Zok Gemara, that Mishnah, you could learn different pshat in it. You could learn different pshat in it that it has nothing to do with our Shaila. Because Imei Hasam, if you only had that Mishnah, Havamina, Hasam who, the Ikala Meimer Mahadakadebe. Yes, it is possible that you could equate that case with the case in our Mishnah, where there was a Lashon Rishon and a Lashon Achron, that contradict each other. And the shaila is, which one do we follow? But there's a whole different way you can learn that shaila. I said, I'm renting it to you for 12 zuhuvim a year. And in the details, in the fine print, it says, which means 1 dinar per month. So it's not a sneer at all. I'm just clarifying the details of the contract. So there might not be a shaila tafas lo sharishon or achon at all. It might just be a suffix. What happened? If it's a suffix, what happened there? It makes sense to you. But in our Mishnah, he surely changed it. There's no way to say that hein cheser, hein yeser means mida b'chevel. There are two contradictory things. Maybe even Reb Shimon ben Gamliel and Reb Yosy would agree to bananas. Kamash and Rab that no, this is actually the same shaila. It's two contradictory contracts, and you see from there that they paskin yachleiku. Okay, we will stop here, B'ez Hashem, and we will continue.